Using MFA, multi-factor authentication, in combination with FIDO, for example, really reduces the complexity for the user because it's so easy when you are having a stick or a USB token or a smart card connected to your computer, and that's all what you need. It's seamless, and when it's seamless, it becomes used and it becomes accepted.
This is KBCast.
Are they completely
As a
cybersecure?
primary target for ransomware campaigns,
Is
that's used
security and testing and performance and scalability.
risk and
We
compliance.
can actually automate those.
Take that data and use it.
Joining me today is Helmut Dansachmueller, VP RFID Products Identification Technologies at HID. And today we're discussing passwordless authentication to help Australia's healthcare industry protect patient data. So Helmut, thanks for joining and welcome.
Thank you for having me here.
Okay, so I'm really curious with your view, your experience, your background, but perhaps give us a bit of a lay of the land in the healthcare security sort of space and how you see it here in Australia.
That's a great question, but I would like to clarify something very important at the very beginning. The entire topic about passwordless authentication, security, and whatever you would like to call it, is not an Australian phenomenon. This is a global one. And also the threats are global. Yes, legislation is always a local legislation. You might have specific rules in Australia which are not valid in Europe or North America. You have the Australian Centre of Cybersecurity, which is great, but they are not doing anything different than NIST is doing in America or BSI is doing in Germany. So threats are global, and regardless where you are, and as we see it in this interview, I'm sitting and I'm located in Germany, you are in Australia, and you are just one mouse click away from my side. So the threat is everywhere, and the threat can come from everywhere. And when I look to the current situation, we clearly see an increase of, let's say it in this way, attacks against the infrastructure, against GDPR, against data privacy, against encryption of data, all these kind of things, denial of service attacks, ransomware, and whatever you have it in Australia. As I said before, it's global, and we need to fight against that. And only if we have, let's call them seamless security measures, which are easy to survive and which are easy to apply for employees, the security is good enough. Because security is as good as the employees are using it and they're not trying to circumvent it. And they will not try to circumvent it when it's absolutely seamless. And they don't really recognize that they are doing highly complicated things when, for example, looking at FIDO, looking at all the passwordless authentications with MFA. It is clearly, as soon as it is seamless for the users, it can work and it will help all the healthcare industry in Australia. I think what is the most important thing is, as I said, having it seamless and making it sure that everybody is applying it. Nobody shares any credentials across the organization with other colleagues and all that kind of stuff. That's the most important thing. I hope I did not speak too much around it, and I hope it was clear what my points are. Let's repeat. The threat is global. The threats are massively increasing in regards to data privacy, in regards to ransom attacks, and in regards to denial of service attacks.
Lots of points interesting that you share, one of which would be on the employee front passwords. You mentioned before, you've got to make things seamless, easy, or else people try to circumvent it, which I agree with. What do you think the sentiment is at the moment with the average employee around passwords?
Yeah, it's crazy. A password, if it is long enough and if it is really secure, there is still an attack vector because passwords need to be verified and need to be stored somewhere. Yes, of course, passwords are stored in a one-way encryption, and you're only comparing the one-way encryption values, but they need to be stored somewhere, and that's the biggest threat you have. When you're using passwordless authentication, for example, FIDO, you're playing and you're introducing private key encryption. So the value which is used to encrypt your data or to verify your identity is never ever stored on the host side, on the other side of the equation. It only remains on your PC, and therefore it can't be stolen. When combining this with additional hardware, as for example MFA, multi-factor authentication says, then it's really secure, and customers and users do not care about passwords. They're acting as always, but they can't share their credential with others because it's the private key, and the private key is stored maybe on the computer, maybe on an additional device, a USB token, a smart card, something like that. And that's the biggest difference.
Do you think as well, just putting my employee consumer hat on, would be back in the day when sort of the internet started, we had a lot less systems that we would log into. You may at best have had one password. Now you have 50, 60, 100, depends what tools, subscriptions, anything that you log into now requires a password, but all different requirements. So do you think that, what do you think the main frustration is for an employee at the moment? Is it just can't remember it? I'm just going to reuse the same password because I can't remember it. I'm not going to get a password manager because I got to pay for it, or my company doesn't allow a password manager. Even if they do, there's another bunch of requirements I've got to adhere to. I'm just trying to really get in the minds of that frustration behind employees who then try to circumvent what they're doing because this introduces a lot of friction.
Absolutely. And yes, formally we said resetting passwords is the most pain in the back. To be honest, it's not, because passwords can easily be resetted with automated processes. But having the pain of not, no, you should not share passwords across different systems, because then the weakest system becomes the entry point into security, and to break the security of a user and break the security of an organization. So passwords need to be different. And then there's the next pain point. Passwords need to be changed on a regular basis. Some companies requesting that every month, every 2 weeks. And how should you remember as a user different password generations for different usages? And password managers do not really solve the problem. It's still the problem that the password needs to be stored on the other side of the equation, as I said, on the host side again. So whenever a password is introduced and is used directly, the password is stored on the other side, and it can be hacked from the other side. There are many occasions, public now, where systems are broken because all these passwords are opened and are becoming public because of a weak system on the other side. With passwordless authentication, using FIDO, for example, passwords can't be broken. The only thing what could happen is that you lose your token. So even with passwordless authentication, you need to have backup mechanisms, like storing the security key somewhere on your local system, but not on the host system. And this provides much better security than password-based systems.
So, from your experience, what would you say induces the most amount of pain from a user perspective, if you have to sort of attribute it to one sort of key element?
Memorizing different passwords for different systems, and then not having the guarantee that nothing happened on the host side. Using MFA, multi-factor authentication, in combination with FIDO, for example, really reduces the complexity for the user, because it's so easy when you are having a stick or a USB token or a smart card connected to your computer, and that's all what you need. It's seamless, and when it's seamless, it becomes used and it becomes accepted. And I think one of the most important pillars for security are not the encryption algorithms. It is the acceptance of the users, because every system depends on the acceptance of the users. And only when the users accept the security mechanisms, they are good enough to survive over a longer term of time.
So do you say this will become sort of it's become the new normal now for people, companies? I mean, I've spoken a lot about passwordless on this show in the past. Yeah, there's some emergence of it, but people are still stuck in the old ways. How would you say we can get people to move beyond removing passwords, not having the headache, removing the pain, making it easier, making it more secure by all the things you just mentioned? How do we get people in that mindset?
The most important topic is education and is knowledge. By demonstrating how easy it is, could be a video, could be YouTube videos, for example, could be just leading by example. If administrators educate their users how to use an MFA token, how to use FIDO, for example, and to demonstrate how easy it is for them and how much time they could save when logging in because they don't need to memorize passwords. I think you have everything you need to convince users to use a passwordless system for their own benefits.
So going back on you said education and knowledge. So there obviously is education, there's knowledge out there. You think it's just time in terms of adoption? Or what do you think that looks like? Because like there is this sort of information that exists out there, and yet not a lot of people have adopted this yet.
You are absolutely right, Carissa. Besides educating the users and getting the acceptance of the users really using it, there is a gap, and this gap needs to be bridged. And this bridge can only happen if, I said it already at the beginning, it's seamless. When customers see how easy it is, that they do not need to remember complicated passphrases, which might need to be changed every month or every second week, then you're in the right system, and then users will accept it. By trying it and giving it a chance, users will love it because it's easier and it provides them with a perceived higher security.
Would you say people are skeptical perhaps? Like, oh, this is so seamless, it's so easy. It may not be secure.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It is like always, especially in IT, you can't see what happened on the host. So therefore, simple education and easy to follow and comprehend information, how and why security based on MFA is more secure and is more convenient, helps to get the acceptance of the users. Users need to feel it, users need to see it, otherwise it won't work. But the organization, from my point of view, they are all having it in their hands. They can provide simple systems, then again, in the introduction phase, educating the users, showing good examples, and then it works. And we see it with many customers. And yeah, we are a security company. We are providing the readers for the MFA systems. And of course, we have a vital interest that MFA will become more will spread more around and will be used by everybody. And what we see and what we experience from our users, the introduction phase always is a nice short phase of demonstrating an MFA solution. And by demonstrating it and by telling the customers, guys, you no longer need to change your passwords again. Don't worry about different passwords for different systems. Your MFA system will solve it for you, and it will solve it in the background. Don't worry about private key, public key, random number generators, or whatever, or challenge response mechanisms. Don't worry about that. Use your token, connect it with your PC, maybe touch it when necessary to log in, and then everything works by magic. And this is what customers love. It works by magic, and it works more secure than anything else.
So I want to slightly shift gears for a moment, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts around the need for passwordless authentication to support Australia's healthcare system in identity management. So everything that we've mentioned and spoken about, people people are busy. They don't have time. People working in healthcare, they don't want to sit there and think, oh, I can't remember my password, got to reset it because there's a crisis happening beside me. So I'm really curious now to get into this because this is a very different situation to someone sitting in a head office in an air conditioned building, for example. It's a very different scenario.
You really hit the nail on its head. Just thinking about a nurse having a lot of stress, then changing the computer system, they need to log in into a special PC to enter the treatment or to verify the treatment which is documented. Then logging out, changing rooms, need to log in again, and all that kind of stuff. When it is seamless and you can log in very easily without having thoughts about your password, it just works because you have maybe your smart card around your neck or you have the token on your key ring, then it's so easy and it's a natural behavior. It is like opening a door. You use the key, you hold the key to your lock, the door opens. You hold the MFA to your notebook or to your computer, to your terminal, or maybe even in the surgery room, having it on your wristwatch, systems like NIMI, for example. And this is the kind of security customers need. And the good thing is, with these wristbands in combination with certain readers, which are also IP67, that's a standard for resistance against water, against chemicals. We can also implement a clean room environment where you have multi-factor, considering clean room requirements, and also the disinfection and the cleaning of the equipment if it is needed. So that's very important. Getting a cheap reader from the street, that's nothing which can be accepted by professionals in the healthcare system. It needs to be a clean room reader. It needs to be a seamless, again, sorry for repeating that, but I think this is key to success, a seamless system which works in a natural way, how customers are managing their access to private issues, to private topics automatically, just by using a credential, holding it to a reader, and then you're logged in. There's nothing more to do.
So what happens when the nurse forgets the key?
That's a great question. And that's the same question like with when a user forgets his password. You can always have replacement devices in the system, and you can easily reactivate and activate the other tokens as a replacement of the former one if you have the right measurements in place. But that's an organizational issue. This has nothing to do with security. The organization needs to ensure the replacement activities and the second replacement parts are available, and there are processes within the organization to take care of this.
So, okay, that's interesting because when you said before the right measurements in place, what do you mean by that?
So when having a real emergency and you don't have the key, then you're really having a big problem. You're having also a big problem when having no passwords or when you forget the password or the password is hacked. So you always need to have an emergency procedure, how to make sure you can log in when it's important. And this is, for example, a vanilla token or a token which is not used by anybody. And then you can activate this emergency token as a temporary token to access the system, or you start replacing the older one with the new one. But this is quite complicated. I would rather vote for a system where you have a temporary token until you get the original token. That's from my point of view, and that's what our customers usually implement as an emergency procedure.
So going back to the temporary token for a moment, is that based on it expires after X amount of time, or it only works once and then it doesn't work, or is there different sort of controls around that again?
That's the good thing with all those systems. All those systems can remotely be activated and deactivated. You can deprovision keys, you can provision keys over the air automatically, quite simple. And that allows you to implement a solution where users can maybe use it for a limited amount of logins, 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever, or they can use it for a limited amount of time, maybe within the next 24 hours, maybe within the next 12 hours. But regardless what it is, the most important thing that it is documented, because documentation, especially with sensitive data in the healthcare systems, documentation is very much important. You need to know who has changed the recording, who had access to controlled substances and all this kind of stuff. But you never start sharing the MFA token with your colleague. A nurse cannot share it with another nurse because then she's not logging in as the person she is. She's then logging in as the person that the colleague is. And this generates many problems in the documentation, especially in the healthcare systems. Because in healthcare, you really need to know who has changed the record, who has used the controlled substance, and all this kind of stuff. That's why it is important to use MFA, not sharing the login process with others, because the others need the token by themselves. They need the token for every login, and therefore they can't share it with a colleague.
Okay, so let's roll through a scenario. I'm just really curious to understand. So I'm Carissa, I'm a nurse, I'm stressed out, I was running late for work, forgot my security key because I'm forgetful, which I am in real life actually. Go to work, panicked, got a bunch of meetings, got to get stuff done, can't log into my system because I don't have the key. So then I call up the help desk and say, hey, I forgot my key, it's at home, like it's not lost, I know where it is. Sure, we're going to give you a temporary token, which is going to last to the end of the day, for example. Again, depending on the measurements that companies have implemented, to your earlier point, then they can go about their day. And then after that time period expires, for example, that temporary token would elapse and then they can go back to using their physical security key.
Yes, that's the usual procedure.
So then following this on a little bit more, in terms of, you said before, obviously we got to know who's logging into what, who's got the temporary key, etc. with documentation. How do people monitor that to make sure, like, hey, this is Carissa calling up? And I know that's sort of more of a business operational sort of process, but what are some of the risks that you see then in that? Because there is a potential window that opens up more risk.
Yes, it opens the door a little bit. I'm very sorry, I don't know the English term for this topic. It's called, in more or less in German, four-eye principle. Because you as a user, you can't claim, hey, I'm Carissa, I have lost my token. Please provide me a temporary token, then I log in as Carissa. But I'm not Carissa, I'm Helmut. No. Then you go to a second colleague, ask to verify your identity with a said, please forgive me that I don't know the English term for a four-eye principle. And this second person verifies and confirms, I am Carissa, I need to have a temporary token for the day. And then this person verify that and can prove that you are Carissa, and then the system works. For a principle is, I think, the most convenient way of doing that. Instead of hurrying up to the IT department, which is on a different floor in a total different office. No, just asking your colleague, verifying your identity, but not sharing your password. The other person doesn't share your password with you. Because usually in password-based systems, you tell your colleague, hey, I have forgotten my password. Please give me yours, and I promise I will not use it again. Forget about that stuff. This is all, yeah, BS is, I think, the politically correct term for that. You need to be sure that the other person just verifies your identity but isn't sharing any secret. And so you have a good system where your identity can be proven by a trusted colleague without sharing passwords, without sharing tokens.
Okay, this is interesting. So then, in terms of someone like loses it completely, maybe they're traveling on a train, they had their keys in their hands, it had everything on it, their house keys included. They leave it. Then what happens? What does that scenario then look like?
Then the system is locked. I have no idea how you could solve this issue if you have not access to a replacement token and if you have no access to a colleague who can prove your identity. You can then maybe use different systems that the system will ask you for the first dog you have, the name of the first dog, asking for the first car brand you used when getting your driving license and all this kind of stuff. Those mechanisms are still valid, but to be honest, they are again still based on shared secrets on the host system. And with social engineering, maybe they can get the name of your dog, maybe they can get your name of your car because you have posted it on Instagram, for example. So all those systems are not really secure. And you as an organization need to decide, okay, when you're on the road, you have forgotten your token. Should I provide you access to the system? Should I provide you limited access to the system that you can maybe just read limited data? But from my point of view, this is the point where security is more important than convenience. And when you're on the road and you have your notebook with you, but having forgotten the token, I'm very sorry, because of the higher security requirements, you can't have access to the system at this moment. This is the only disadvantage.
So then, just say I'm on the train, I left it there, someone else finds it. I mean, they'd have to really know who I was, where I worked, what it was for. Or would you then still call up your, I don't know, IT department and say, hey, I've completely lost it. I have no idea where it is. What sort of then the process then?
If you really know that you have forgotten it, it's quite easy. You can immediately deactivate the token in your systems remotely, or IT can deactivate the system and can deprovision the keys automatically. And then you start from the very beginning with a replacement token the next day or the day when you have access to your new token, and then you can replace it. But then it always requires the support of the IT system. And then it's no longer convenient, then it's no longer seamless. But yeah, as said, you need to die one death, and you can't have high security with convenience. That's still possible. But when the token is no longer available, when the token becomes defect, then you need to have an emergency procedure. And this procedure maybe doesn't work when you're on the road. I'm very sorry for that, but that's the price you need to pay for security. But we are rather talking about healthcare systems. In healthcare systems, I'm assuming you are working in an organization where you have the IT centrally in your hospital, in your building, and not when being on the road. The being on the road syndrome is rather for street warriors, for salespeople, for technicians, but not so much in the healthcare systems.
So, Helen, you talk about as well, this process will improve clinical workflows. What do you mean by clinical workflows?
Clinical workflows, they start and end with the recording of data and storing the data and making sure that you know who has entered the data, who has changed the data. And hospitals at the very beginning, they do not ask, okay, how secure do I need to be? They're asking, what would it cost when it's not secure? So having seamless processes which make sure that you can have access to data saves a lot of money, because you are having faster access to systems, you comply with local legislation and regulations, and making sure that you protect the data with appropriate mechanisms. I think this is the most important benefit from it. And by having that, I think it makes the risk of being on the road having no credential, it softens the disadvantage of the systems by having much more processes and being very easy. So I can tell you, we are offering, for example, and I do not want to make too much promotion, but we are having credentials which are placed in the surgery room. You can report every tool which you are using for the surgery with an RFID reader. And at the end of the surgery, you press one button and you get the entire report of which tools are used, which systems have been used, and then you're getting immediately the receipt for the surgery. And this can be then used in the backend systems for asking the health insurance companies to pay for that and to document the entire surgery, for example. So, documenting the systems, having controlled access to substances, and always having a record who did what on the systems. This is the value, and this saves the money, which in every healthcare system and in every region, customers and administrators in the healthcare systems are asking for. Especially the health insurance companies, they also would like to know, okay, what really happened on a system and who has done what with it. That's why it is so important to have reliable data and reliable process documentation.
So let's zoom out for a moment. How do you see passwordless moving forward? What do you see on the horizon? What are your thoughts?
A further development of passwordless systems could be the use of biometric data. You can either use biometric data directly or you can use biometric data locally to activate your token, and then the token will do the rest with the backend systems. So, a further development could be biometric authentication. However, in certain countries, customers are very reluctant to use their fingerprint and to use their face recognition because then they might say, no, somebody can take a fingerprint of mine and can use the fingerprint on the systems. Sometimes they are saying, yeah, somebody can take a photograph and the photograph could be manipulated to do biometric authentication. However, as we all know in the IT security environments, face recognition can be easily proven by having LiDAR systems by making sure that it is a three-dimensional model in front of the camera. All those things, I think, is the further development. But please don't do step 3 before step 2 or step 1. Let's start with passwordless systems, and then maybe over the time, biometric authentication becomes the most relevant new innovative system. And yes, of course, we are also offering biometric systems like fingerprint and face recognition.
So, Helen, do you have any sort of closing comments or final thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Educate your users to gain acceptance by the users because the security of a system always depends on the acceptance of the users and make it easy for them to use it, and don't blame them if something goes wrong. Help them to understand what went wrong and make sure they are doing it better the next time. This will guarantee consistent and consistent and secure systems. And consistent and secure systems is not a stupid story about data consistency. No, this is vital to survive. Remember all the systems which went down because ransomware conquered the systems. Make sure users understanding what you are doing and what they are doing, and that they are the entry to your IT systems. They need to feel the responsibility, but making it easy for them to and breathe the security these organizations need nowadays because of all the threats which are happening.
This is KBcast, the voice of cyber.
Thanks for tuning in. For more industry-leading news and thought-provoking articles, visit kbi.media to get access today.
This episode is brought to you by Mercsec, your smarter route to security talent. Mercsec's executive search has helped enterprise organizations find the right people from around the world since 2012. Their on-demand talent acquisition team helps startups and mid-sized businesses scale faster and more efficiently. Find out more at mercsec.com today.